There's been a lot of depression in our family. So.
Hey there! Why do you want to hear motivational things? For the ultimate success, happiness, health, and wealth, to value success and failure equally, to learn something new and be inspired, to increase knowledge about various fields, subscribe to us and stay tuned for endless motivation. How we approach the difficulties makes all the difference. Start saying thank you for the difficulties that you are in. That will teach you lessons.
Taking on the heaviest load of responsibility that you can conceptualize and bear. It'll do it for you. It'll give you a reason to wake up in the morning. It'll give you a balm for your conscience when you wake up at night and ask yourself what you're doing with your life. It'll make you a credit to yourself and to your family, and it'll make you a boon to your community. And more than that, there's more than that. You know, it's said in Genesis that every person is made in the image of God. And there's an idea in Genesis that God is that which confronts the chaos of potential with truth and courage. That's the logos. And if we're made in the image of God, that's us. That's what we do, is we confront the potential of chaos, the future, the unformed future. We confront that consciously.
Our daughter ended her life at 24 due to depression. If someone is determined to end their life, how can one change their mind? Oh, well, first of all, I'm very sorry about that. That's a terrible thing. Sorry. There's been a lot of depression in our family, so it's a question that cuts close to the bone. The depressed person thinks, everywhere I look, it's nothing but catastrophe, and I can't see any way out of it. I can't see any path forward whatsoever. And then they think as well, and maybe it's the combination of these two thoughts that really make people suicidal. It's like, it's hopeless. It isn't going to get any better. No matter where I turn, there's no escape. The suffering is unbearable. And I'm absolutely no use whatsoever to anyone. It would be better for everyone if I was just gone, because if I'm not so much of a burden now that it's going to destroy their life, then I'm going to be that much of a burden in the future. People have asked me whether or not I believe in God, and I've answered in various ways. No, but I'm afraid he probably exists. That's one answer. Yeah, no, but I'm terrified he might exist. That would be a truthful answer to some degree. Or that I act as if God exists, which I think is, I do my best to do that. But then there's a real stumbling block there, because there's no limit to what would happen if you acted like God existed. I mean, maybe it's not reasonable to say to believers, you aren't sufficiently transformed for me to believe that you believe in God, or that you believe the story that you're telling me. The way you live isn't sufficient testament to the truth. And people would certainly say that, let's say, about the Catholic Church, or at least the way that it's been portrayed, is that with all the sexual corruption, for example, it's like, really, you believe that Jesus Christ was the Son of God, and yet you act that way, and I'm supposed to buy your belief. So, and then, you might also say, well, does that mean you have to believe in God? And I don't think of the proper answer to that is that you need to agree with a propositional statement. Does God exist? Yes. Like, is this table there? Yes. It's not that kind of relationship. I mean, it's characterized in the Old Testament as a struggle. So Israel means those who struggle with God. And you have to participate in that struggle. And you can do that, weirdly enough, as a believer or as a non-believer. Maybe sometimes more intensely as a non-believer. The issue might be more paramount then, the issue of virtue and the issue of the ultimate orientation. Encourage things to develop along that, towards that divine goal. Like, what else would you possibly do? Once you think that through, it's like, you're always aiming at something that's better, or you wouldn't be aiming. You're always moving towards something that's better, or you wouldn't be moving. So then why wouldn't you move towards the greatest good? Well, it's because it's terrifying, I suppose, in part. But then I've tried to put that into practice in my life, and it's tearing me into pieces. I asked you to define love, and I'm going to define it on my terms now, and that is the best in me serving the best in you. And I think that's the deepest pleasure. That's the deepest and most lasting pleasure, and it is the most fundamental motivation. It's the inexhaustible source, because if I can do that, whenever I do that, I feel that I'm being properly. Well, I think that's what you're supposed to do by accepting the proposition that God is love. I mean, it's God is love and God is logos. Those are both there. So then the question, to some degree, is the rank order of the two, and I would say God is truth within love. And that's the animating spirit of mankind. And that's a way different claim than the one the atheists are going after, by the way.
Yeah.
Think about it, everyone. Is truth in the service of love not the best animating spirit of mankind when it isn't pursuing an aberration? We can all ask ourselves that question. The reality that is most justifiable is brought about by the action of truth in the service of love. Edinburgh is an unbelievably beautiful city. The whole central mile of it, square mile essentially, is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it's marred by random placements of 1970s brutalist architecture. And they're just horrible. It's complete lack of regard for the architectural context, and they're all being torn out and replaced, thank God. So, well, this architectural idea, so back to the cathedral, what's really interesting about a cathedral with, let's say, Christ as Pantocrator on the ceiling is spread against the ceiling, is that it's not the state that's portrayed up there, right? It's not a map of the country. It's not even a map of the world. It's not a geographical locale or a political institution. It's the transcendent individual. And, it's just not obvious to me. It seems obvious to me that that's correct. And that if it isn't the transcendent individual, then it becomes the state. And as soon as the transcendent becomes the state, then we have a catastrophe. And I don't see any difference between the insistence that our identity is predicated on our group membership. I don't see any real difference between that and the insistence that we're just handmaidens of the state. It's a totalitarian insistence. And I think part of that too is maybe, I learned from Jung that as soon as you posit an ideal, you also specify a judge. And the higher the ideal, the more severe the judgment because of your distance from the ideal. And so part of what we're seeing too might be a rebellion against the awful requirements of that ideal. But that doesn't justify the rebellion. Because if it's really the ideal, then if you don't act it out, you fail to act it out at your peril. And then we need to have a serious conversation about the metaphysical, about the practical implications of the idea of this ideal. I mean, if we've had this conversation about the transcendent individual as the ideal against which we should all be judged and to which we should strive to emulate, is there any relationship between that ideal and the structure of reality itself? That's the $100 question, so to speak. We have a human ideal, and you could say merely psychologically, maybe even merely biologically, that's something we originated, that's part of our biological nature, that's expressed in this ideal, and it's nothing more than that. But you could also say, well, perhaps it is something more than that. Perhaps it's reflective of the structure of being itself. I mean, it depends on our position in the cosmos. We are self-conscious. We are that which reflects being itself, or perhaps even makes it possible. It's not that obvious what our role is. It might not be so trivial, despite our mortality.
Up is down, what's left is right. Chasing stars and holding you. I can't see the end, but we'll see it through. Times don't fly too high. Be sure to keep the ground in sight. Fly forever if you keep it tight. Love the world but keep the sky on your mind.